Hey guys, welcome to an interesting video on Wild Rift. So we're back with another Wild Rift discussion video, and this one is gonna be on one-tricking. Now I really love making all these discussion videos recently because obviously Wild Rift is a game that I love, and making just videos on topics like one-tricking, like smurfing, like even the one I did on Dragon vs Herald, which is probably my favorite discussion video that I made. Because of the perception of Dragon versus Herald, which I probably will make an updated one sooner or later because of the new Elemental Rift changes, and share my thoughts on that when I have enough experience to actually have a opinion that I'm confident in. But yeah, I've really been loving this series. Don't know about you guys, but I've really been loving this series on just discussing topics on Wild Rift. So anyways, obviously, as usual for all our discussion videos, in the background we're going to be having just a random gameplay just to keep you guys entertained while I go about my discussion. Most of the time I try to plan my discussions to be around the same length as the time of the gameplay, but sometimes especially today, I do believe that I will be ending the discussion before the gameplay ends, so you guys can just enjoy the rest of the gameplay after I finished the discussion. So today we're going to be talking about one-tricking. So what exactly is one-tricking? I'm sure most of you probably know already what it is, but for the people who don't, I'm going to be explaining exactly what it is. So basically, one-tricking is playing just only one single champion, also known as being a one-trick pony. So one-tricking basically can be on any single champion. It can be on mechanically difficult champions, like for example, one-tricking Fiora, Yasuo, Akali, Irelia. These sort of champions could be on complicated champions. It could also be on easy champions. Like you could be one-tricking, maybe you could be one-tricking a Soraka. You could be one-tricking a Mumu. Those type of so-called quote-unquote easy champions. At least not as mechanically demanding as those that I've listed previously. So it can really be on any champion. Now, personally, of course, as you guys know, I am not a one-trick. I do like to be able to play a large variety of champions, especially as I went through in my Wild Rift Fundamentals video on building a champion pool. I personally believe having a champion pool, I wouldn't say it's better, but I would say that it is preferable for me and my personal way that I play the game. So I'm not saying that one-tricking is good or bad, but that's why this is a discussion video, because I think that there are pros and cons of both having a champion pool and also one-tricking, because obviously everything in life comes with pros and cons pretty much. So if you guys have different thoughts than I do, you can always share it in your in the comments below. Now, of course, this video is just a discussion. This is not meant to answer the question of should I one-trick or not, because that is really only a question that you can answer for yourself, because after all, you yourself are playing the game, and it's up to you to decide whether you want to one-trick or you want to create a huge champion pool, or you want to maybe two-trick or something, like just play two champions or something like that. So basically, it's up to you. But I'm just going to generally lay out the pros and cons in my perspective from one-tricking a champion. So we're first going to start off with the pros, then we're going to move on to the cons. So what are the pros of one-tricking? Now, for me, and I think for everybody else, the biggest factor is basically your champion mastery. Now, what do I mean by champion mastery? I don't literally mean like mastery 5 or mastery 7 on the champion, because after all, that is just a number. It doesn't really say so much about it. Like I'm sure you guys have seen there are champions, there are people like who play champions with no mastery that carry your games. There are people who are mastery 7 that if you didn't know they're mastery 7, you would think they're first timing the champion in ranked, because they're just running it down and feeding, like starting the game 0-6-0 or something like that. So that's not exactly what I mean. What I mean by having champion mastery over a champion is, for example, having the knowledge of your champion matchups. Like for example, let's say you main Yasuo, for example. You play Yasuo in the mid lane, so basically Yasuo's matchups. You know if you're playing into an Akali, whether you win or you lose, when do you win, when do you lose, after you get which item you win, if she gets what item you lose, or when you hit certain levels before her, do you win, do you lose, should you take a trade, what kind of factors do you need to consider. Like for example, my win wall is down, if I take a trade I will definitely lose the trade, or in converse, maybe my win wall is up, if I outplay this by dashing across the minion to the other side of my win wall, I'm guaranteed to win the trade. That's what I mean by champion mastery. So you know the ins and outs of the champion. You know what are your power spikes when you hit certain items, when you hit certain levels. You know your matchups, like who do you win against, depending on whether they're fed or not, who do you lose against, that sort of thing. You should be incredibly familiar. Of course, you don't get it right 100% of the time, and not basically you would never lose if you always know when you win and when you lose, that sort of thing. But you basically would have a very high level of knowledge, and you basically know, like let's say 95% of the time, and get it right, whether you win or lose certain matchups. You should know exactly when you can and cannot kill. Like for example, you know you have flash and you have ignite up, and you see that you have ult, but you also know that your opponent is out, so you should know exactly what you have to do in order to get the kill. For example, you know, oh, I have to go in, I have to flash to the right to avoid the Akali ultimate, and then I have to ignite her and, you know, dash in and you know, destroy her with my Q or whatever. You know, so you basically would know exactly whether you can kill someone or not based on your summoner spells, their summoner spells, you know, etc., that kind of thing. Basically, this is sort of also tying into matchups. And of course, also tying into that, you would know your own power spikes, as I mentioned already, your item power spikes, your level power spikes, etc. And finally, basically when you get to like the highest level of just knowing your champion, you can start styling on your opponent, you can start doing all those montage kind of plays, especially on more mechanically difficult champions, which I mentioned a lot already, but you know, you just see those like 1v5 plays from like an Irelia or something, like you know exactly who to dash to, you have the mechanics to pull it off, to dash to the correct person, all that kind of thing. Like it's a completely different thing. Like as a non-Irelia player, I would know what I have to do to win the 1v4, for example. I gotta dash to this guy, and then to this guy and start auto-attacking him to kill him first, then get off my stun, etc. I know exactly what I have to do, but actually doing it is an entirely different story, because I end up dashing to the wrong person, I end up dashing to the minion, and I don't reset my dash, etc. So having the mechanics to pull it off is completely different from knowing what to do. So when you get to that point, you know, you basically have attained, you know, a high level of champion mastery, and yeah, so that is the main pro of one tricking. You should be, you know, at that point eventually. Now, the other the second pro that I have is your champion being a constant factor. So this basically makes the game easier, particularly for people who are playing, who are just starting out the game, which is why I recommend basically one tricking a champion until Mastery 5 while learning the game, as I mentioned in my fundamentals video. But basically, even if you're playing for a year or so and you're a one trick, basically you should be having complete mastery of your champion, as I mentioned in the first pro, which is the first pro, of course. So you don't actually have to focus on playing your champion at all, because you should basically be able to play the champion like in the at the back of your hand, like with your eyes closed, not literally but figuratively. So playing the champion should be literally no problem for you at all. You should be able to play the champion more or less perfectly, so you can focus on other things like macro, for example. Like what should you do? Should you rotate for Herald? Should you rotate for Dragon? Should you go rotate and push mid, or should you defend top or whatnot? So basically you can focus on other aspects of the game, or you can focus on timing summoner spell cooldowns, timing ultimate cooldowns of your enemy. So basically it frees up a lot of your mind space to start thinking about a lot of other aspects of the game, which you should be thinking of anyway, whether you're one tricking or not. But all I'm saying is that it makes it a lot easier to be able to focus on other things when you don't have to focus on playing your champion at all, or you focus very minimally on playing your champion, is what I'm saying basically. That's the second pro that I have. Now the third pro, which comes with a little bit of a caveat, a little bit of an asterisk, is climbing rank. So obviously if you're really good at a champion, particularly if it's a carry kind of champion, you're likely to be winning a lot more games and you're likely to be climbing ranked. So of course, if you're one tricking like an ADC, if you're one tricking any kind of damage champion, as long as you're not one tricking like a tank or a support, you should be able to very easily climb. regardless of what kind of rank you're in, whether you're in bronze one tricking or you're in like master one tricking, you should be climbing, because when you're good at the carry champion generally, you should be able to carry games and you should be able to climb. Now, not just on carry champions, but if you are a really, really good support, or if you're a really good tank top, you can still carry the game. Now, it's really underrated having like a good support or a good tank, but tanks and supports do carry games as well, just that it's not as obvious and your impact on the game is not as high as a carry in terms of how hard can you carry the game, obviously because you're not a carry champion. But imagine if you are, for example, a Thresh one trick. Just imagine how many kills your team gets solely because of you and your skill. Like, you land one hook, your team gets a kill. Now, if you didn't land that hook, will your team get the kill? No. But did you get the kill? No. So are you carrying the game? Kind of. But you're not getting the kills. You're getting like your ADC fed, you're getting your mid lane fed, and they're carrying the game for you. But indirectly, you are carrying the game because you're getting them the kills, and by giving them kills, they can carry the game for you. So basically, you are carrying them, but a little bit more indirectly than what traditionally a carry is. Of course, being a support one trick or something like that, if you are very good at your roams, very good at impacting the map, of course you can still carry even as a tank. Imagine you have an amazing 5-man Malphite engage or a Malphite one trick. You know, you can that one play can win the game for your team. So basically, you generally should be climbing ranked. Now the last part, the last point, last pro I'm thinking of is enjoyment. Now I know that there are a lot of one tricks who basically just enjoy only that one champion, and they're only having fun in the game because they're playing that one champion. For example, in this game, if you guys see, I'm playing with the Nami, and I'm sure you guys know that I duo with this Nami a lot, and she's basically a Nami one trick. So from what I heard from her, basically she really only enjoys playing the Nami itself and doesn't really enjoy playing other champions. So a lot of people derive their enjoyment just from playing that one champion, and really there is nothing wrong with that. I mean, at the end of the day, Wild Rift is a game, and a game is meant to be fun. So basically, if you're not having fun playing other champions, then why do that? Just because your team needs a tank to be a support, why pick Leona when you know you can pick Nami, which is what you enjoy and which is what you're good at? So I mean, that applies to all other champions you one trick as well. If you enjoy a certain champion, then of course just play that champion because you're having fun. So that, in my opinion, is the strongest reason why you should one trick, and I think is the main reason why a lot of people actually one trick a champion, is simply just because they enjoy it. And I think that is reason enough, and I don't think that we should be judging or criticizing people who one trick, you know, because at the end of the day, it's a game and we all want to have fun. So yeah. Alright, so now we're gonna jump into some of the cons of one tricking, and there are some big cons of one tricking, which some of them are pretty obvious. Now the first most obvious one, and probably the most detrimental one, is getting your champion banned or getting your champion taken. So of course, when you're one tricking, now of course you don't always have a choice to pick who you want to one trick. Sometimes it's just based on enjoyment. For example, if I'm a Yasuo enjoyer and I just want to one trick Yasuo, I'm just gonna do that. But the issue is that, as you guys know, Yasuo is banned relatively often. If not, he's like picked early on in the draft quite often as well. So for example, if Yasuo gets banned by the enemy team, or if the Yasuo gets first picked by the enemy team and you don't get your champion that you want, then obviously you're in trouble, because you don't have your one trick and you're not familiar with other champions. So that is the kind of the biggest issue of one tricking, is not getting your champion. And a sort of subset of this con is my second con, which is not getting your role. So for example, if you know, we're just always gonna jump back to the example of being a Yasuo one trick, because it's pretty simple just talking about the same champion. So for example, you're a Yasuo one trick and you're playing mid, and you don't get mid. For example, you get like, let's say you get a role that you can't play Yasuo, and let's say you get put in as ADC. Strictly speaking, Yasuo can be played as ADC, just that it's really, I don't think it's that good, but you get into a role where you can't play your main champion. It's sort of a little bit similar to not getting your main champion banned or getting it picked by the enemy team. So basically, it's sort of the same problem where you have to pick a different champion. Now, of course, this second con can be sort of nullified if your champion can be played in multiple roles. For example, if you're one tricking Gragas can be played top, he can be played mid, he can be played jungle, and he can be played support. So there are these sort of 4 role champions which are really good. But if you are playing something else, let's say you one trick Draven. Now Draven pretty much can only be played in ADC. He can be played top and mid, but you're pretty much gonna get destroyed, I feel, even if you're a one trick, just because there's no one protecting him and he's really squishy. So let's say you one trick Draven and you get a role that's not ADC, then you're pretty much in big trouble, because what are you really gonna do? So obviously that leads me to the third con, which is not knowing how to play any other champion. So that is probably, I mean, I did say the first one was the biggest one, but this sort of ties into that, where if you can only play one champion, which is your one trick, then if you don't get the champion for any reason, not getting a role, getting banned, getting taken, you know, whatever sort of reason it may be, basically you don't get your champion and you don't know how to play anything else, you're going to be dragging yourself and you're going to be dragging your team down, because you basically know that you are not as competent on any other champion or something like that. Now of course a good backup for that is to know how to play another champion, but of course then it wouldn't be one tricking anymore, right? Because you would have a champion pool. So yeah, so that is sort of the huge problem of one tricking. And lastly, we have two last cons. Now the second last con I have is team comp issues. So this can be a huge issue, because sometimes your team comp needs a tank, it needs a mage or something like that. Back to the example of one tricking Yasuo in mid. Mid traditionally is the role that mages play. So for example, if you have like an AD top, let's say you have a Garen top, you have like, let's say, a Kha'Zix in the jungle, you have, let's say, a Lucian ADC, and let's say you have a Leona support. Now what you really need to round out this team comp is magic damage. For example, picking Katarina or Orianna in the mid lane, but because you're a Yasuo one trick, you pick Yasuo in the mid lane. Now for example, if the enemy team has a couple of tanks, all the tanks can do is just stack AD, and because your team has no AP, you basically kind of quote unquote lose the draft because of your pick. So you basically kind of semi-sabotage your team by not fitting the team comp. Now of course, this isn't a problem that is only for one trick. Sometimes people just don't pick champions that are good for the team comp anyways, so that will always be an issue. But this issue cannot be subverted by one tricking, because if you're one tricking, you basically only pick that one champion and you're gonna ruin your team comps occasionally. Now of course, certain champion picks are more likely to do this than others, like as I pointed out, Yasuo mid. If you're one tricking Fiora top, it's not likely to be an issue majority of the time, unless maybe your team needs a tank, and you know, something like that. So it can happen with any champion in any role. The least likely champion to screw up your team comp if you one trick is any ADC champion, because generally any ADC is going to be a squishy high damage marksman, whereas all the other roles can sort of adjust to what the team wants, kind of deal. And now the last one, last con I have, which turns out that this video is going to almost cover the length of the gameplay, is nerfs. So now this is a big thing to consider, which is, or not even just nerfs, but buffs as well. So for example, if your champion gets over buffed to the point that they're so OP, your one trick gets over buffed, it might lead to like the first problem where your champion gets banned or your champion gets taken by the enemy team. But if your champion gets nerfed, now that leads to another problem, because you can only play it one champion, and if your champion gets a major nerf, like for example cutting their damage in half or something, or you know, some huge nerf, your champion is going to be severely weakened. And since you one trick and can only play that champion, basically what you're going to have to do is either you find a new main, or you're going to have to adapt to the changes and just deal with the fact you're going to be dealing less damage, you're less tanky, you have longer cooldowns, etc., whatever kind of nerfs you may get. And that is pretty much a huge issue, because you cannot really deal with that fact like playing other champions. A lot of times, like, the OP champion in a role is nerfed. For example, Fiora was OP in top for a long time. She got nerfed, and a lot of people start playing other champions. A lot of Fiora mains start playing a lot more champions. But for example, if you're a Fiora one trick, that is a lot easier said than done. Of course, you can start one tricking a new champion, you can start trying to learn a new champion, but that is a whole different story altogether. And if your champion just gets nerfed, then you're pretty much in, you know, up the creek. So that is definitely a huge con. So that pretty much covers it from my pros and cons. And at the same time, I've pretty much not intentionally, but pretty much timed it such that we've reached the end of the game as well. Turns out I talked way longer than I thought. But anyways, so here we have the end of the the gameplay as well. So I'll leave you guys with the stats as usual. So thank you guys for watching the video, and goodbye.